Good. It's recording. I made this VFX folder, and in there I placed some files. The first we're going to use is the one called Scepter. So you can just start copying this to your own machine. When you work with something like compositing, it's a really good idea to work with your files locally. If you work with files on the server, you're going to put a lot of strain on the network. Things will get slow, and so generally have the files locally. The same thing goes when you're doing video editing. It's simply because, especially with Wi-Fi, it's just not possible to pull the data fast enough. So anyway, I have this Scepter file, and I'll show you what's going on. Let's see. This is Nuke, and it's actually Nuke X, but there's no big difference in how it looks. Nuke Studio, on the other hand, looks quite different. It's more like an editing suite, but we're not going to use that right now. It's divided into areas. Obviously, we have like a preview area up here, where you can where you can see what you're working on. Then we have at the bottom here, we have our node graph, or the flow. That's where we do our editing or compositions. Nuke is a node-based compositor, as opposed to something like After Effects that is more like a timeline layer-based compositor. Nuke tends to be very popular with visual effects, film, more advanced commercials and that sort of thing. After Effects, on the other hand, tends to be quite popular for motion graphics. But both programs can do a bit of what the other program can. It's just what they're best suited for. So this is where we're going to do our things. There's also a curve editor, like the one in Maya, sort of the same idea, where you can control the curves. There's also a dope sheet, a bit like in Maya, where we can control the keys. At the bottom of the viewer here, there's playback buttons, so we can play back, and sometimes there will be like extra buttons popping up, depending on what we're trying to do. But we'll get to that. On the left here, we have all of our tools. They are separated into categories. So there is this one, image, that contains the tool to read files like videos or image stacks or what you need. There's also tools to create like a constant image or checkerboard or color bars or whatever. Then we have the draw node or nodes, where we can do things like rotoscoping. It can create noise maps and other things. Then there's time tools, where we can read time clips, speed them up, slow them down, things like that. Then there's the channel tools, where we can work with channels. So that means we can swap red, green, and blue, or we can add other channels. Actually, one thing that is very special about Nuke is the fact that it has a lot of channels when you do something, or can have it. So normally when you think of an image, you think of the red, green, and blue channel. Perhaps you think of the alpha channel, the transparency as well. But in Nuke you can have many other things. You can have things like C-depth, so that every pixel knows how far away from the camera it is. You can have things like motion vectors, so every pixel knows where it's moving from this frame to the next. It can have separate color data, so you have color for what's called the beauty pass, where you have the color that is rendered, and then you have a separate channel that is the shadow color, and a separate channel that is the reflection color, and you know, everything that you can separate. And then what you can do with all these channels is that when you have a final rendered sequence out of Maya or RenderMan or whatever you're using, and you import it into Nuke, you can sit there and tweak everything in more or less real time. Instead of having to go, no, I want a little bit more reflection, turn it up, re-render 5,000 frames, and then do it again 2 weeks later. This way you sort of split everything up, and then you can tweak it when you get there. And the channels tools are used to sort of separate and combine channels or swap them around. Then there's the color tools, so there's like grading nodes, color correction nodes, and other things. Filters, blurs, and a lot of other filter types. Keying tools, so if you do something like a green screen, a blue screen, or a Luma keying, other things like that, that would be that tool. Then there's the layer or merge tools. So especially the merge node here, the hotkey M, is something we're going to use a lot. That's how you take two layers and put one on top of the other. So that's how it usually works in Nuke, is that you have a foreground and a background, and you combine those. And then the output of that is the two images combined, and then you can combine that with another image, and so forth and so on. If you are familiar with a cup system in sports, you know, like at Wimbledon they start like 128 players or something like that, and then second round is 64, and then it's 32. So sort of like a graph like that, a tree-like structure, is what we're going to do when we do composition. Transform nodes, you can move things, drag things, warp things, distort things. Then there's a 3D menu where you can do 3D in here. It has a 3D workspace. You can have 3D models, but I tend to do 3D more in Maya, but you can do things like camera tracking and then export that to Maya and then do your 3D scene and then put it back and combine it. Particles, deep image, an interesting area that we haven't worked with a lot. Viewer things, we can do stereo if we like. That's one of the advantages to the channel system, that everything you do can have a right and left at the same time. So instead of when you do your composition, you have to do all of your compositions for the right eye image and one more time for the left eye image. You can just do it in one, and then it will do both and then split it out at the end. So a nice thing. And then there's a couple of other tools here, different kinds. Here, backdrop, sort of a way to organize things, so it's easier to see what you're doing. I'll show that later. Then there's in Nuke X specifically, there's a few tools from the Foundry toolbox. What is called Fernacore tools. That can do like specialized things, like remove flicker. If you record video in here, because of the light being neon, you know, they flicker at 50 Hertz. And if you're recording at say 24 or 60 at different rate, you'll get flickering because it's not hitting at the same level of light. So deflicker can remove that. You can also align clips and other things. And there's some tools that I have installed separately from a free tool site called Nupedia. So that's more or less it to begin. You can see up here, it tells us information about what we're seeing. So the default in Nuke is that it starts up in 2K, which is like a film format. So it says 2K, 35 millimeter full aperture, 2048 x 1556, blah 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 blah. But we're probably not going to do that. But I'll show you. There is you can bring up the settings. So if I'm in this area here, my node graph, and I press S, it will bring up my settings, and you can see over here we have the settings for my format right now. So that's 2K full aperture, blah blah blah. If I was working in HD or something like that, I would choose the HD 720 or 1080 format and then work with that. But I'm not doing that right now. I actually forgot. This is our settings area here on the right. A bit like Maya, same idea. One thing you should note is that this little cross here beside the 10 will empty out this stack, because it'll, whatever nodes you create, it'll stack in there. So you can clear it by clicking that. Okay, so let's grab the Scepter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dump the whole Scepter folder into Nuke. There. This is an old, some old tutorial material from Maya version a long time ago. Some of you wasn't born when this was done. Never mind. So what you see is that it will stack a few things in here. Obviously, you can zoom by rolling, and you can move it around by using the middle mouse button. Right click will bring up the menu, actually the same as out here, and left mouse button will enable you to click and move things around. So you can see a couple of them will go error, and that's because this is a zip file. I don't want that. Delete. And this is my binary file. Don't want that. So what's left is 3 files.
Every file is
Every file is what?
yeah. Look.
Maybe it's because you didn't install QuickTime. And you still have every file is at the... Okay. I'll just pause it and see what goes on. The reason why you're getting errors is, and I'm not, it's because I installed an extension and I wasn't noting that it was actually in effect. So, just go to this one. So if you go into the Scepter files, there's sub folders in here, and if you drag those in, you shouldn't get errors. You're not getting errors now, right?
Yeah, I will play them.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
I
Okay.
want you to render 1 through 6.
Give me a second. Okay. So these are the files, but you can't see anything up here, right? The way you make this visible is by connecting it to this viewer node. And this is a little special for Nuke. So if I click my background here, I can either drag that up and connect it, or I can press 1 on this one.
You plug in an MB reader.
Yes, you're not going to import the MB file. I'll come to you in a second. So if I press 1, I will get this connected and it will show it up here. Okay? The same thing goes for the other files. If I press 1, you can see it will show that file up there. And actually you can use the whole series of numbers, so I can press 2 on another one and 3 on the third one. So whenever I press 1, 2 or 3, it will show me that file. It's if you've tried other programs, this is very different, but it's actually quite effective. Okay, so first of all, if I double click the Jester background path IFF, you can see that this is just a single file. So it will be, just press 1 here, it will be the same file all over. That's because that is our background. But as I drag my timeline, you can see that things start to happen in the previews down here. Something's going on in this one, so I'll just look at that. That is our Scepter falling down. And if I look at this one, this just looks black. But in reality, it's because this is the shadow. So if I move my cursor into the area of the viewer and press A, I'll be looking at the alpha channel. So you can see it says A up here. So this is what I'm going to use to create the shadow. And I can just press A again, and then I'm back to the color RGB. So the way I'm going to do this is just going to stack these things on top of each other. So I'm going to my merge nodes and choose merge, the one with the M. That creates this node. If you had something selected, it would auto connect it. But what I want is I want the background pass on B and the shadow pass on A. Okay. Then I will look at this. I'll press 1. And you can see what happens now is that it will layer the shadow on top of the background. Okay? Then the next thing I'll do is make another merge node here, and I'll just leave this selected, press M, and that creates a new merge node. You can see what it does is it connects this to the A. That is the foreground. That's not what I want, but give me a second. So I'll connect this one to B. So that is wrong. But if I then press Shift X on this one, what this will do is it'll swap the, I need to select it, Shift X. It will swap the inputs. So now I have this one coming into A, the foreground, and the composition of the background coming in the background. So the result is I have this clip with the scepter falling down, bouncing around.
Nice.
And with the shadow on it. So maybe you will say, okay, what's the deal? I could just render that as one sequence, and you could. But the advantage here is that you can start doing things to this. So for instance, when this scepter is up here, I might want this shadow to be more blurry. So if I just pull this apart, I select the shadow, and I go to my filters, and I choose blur. So you can see that puts a blur node in between here, and it puts the blur node up here. And you can see all of the other nodes are stacked over here. So I will drag this one, the size of the blur, so you can see that will blur it more or less. And then I'll make a small animation here. So I go to the first frame, frame 1, I just push the rewind button. And then at this first frame, I will drag this up to here. And then I will click this little button with the curve on the right and go set key. Then that makes it blue. And then I go forward a bit. So around here I want it sharp. Here. So I just drag this down and this will auto key. So the result is that it will make the shadow come into focus as the object moves closer. So that was one thing I could do. Another thing I could do is I could maybe do a grade on my foreground here. So I go to my color tab and I apply a grade here. So that comes in there. And what I can do is something like do a gamma correction, or I can maybe move the colors. So if I go multiply, click this one, and then make it more into the red area, like so. Then that will affect only this part here. So that works nicely. And what I can do here, so if I take all of this and move this up a little bit, I can see that the whole background I want to grade in a different way. So I'm going to grab grade here, and then I get a new one up here. I can then make it slightly darker. And that will darken the whole thing. Whole thing. You can see if I do a gain, I will make the shadow, shadow a little brighter as well in here. So that way, what you can do is wherever you put a new tool or a new node, it will only affect whatever is going into it, and it affects the result coming out of it. The final thing, to create a video of this, what we do is we select the node we want the result of, and that's this one. Then we go to the image tool and go right, or just press W. Then we put a bright node in here, and up here the bright node appears. If it's not up there, it's just empty the stack. You can double click it and it'll go up here. I need to choose where it should go, so I click the file button here and I say let's desktop, and it should be septa.mov. Click save, and you can see what it does is it pops up with the format here. I can use ProRes. It's a format used by more professional cameras, for instance. I will just use the H.264. And actually, if I click render now, I will get really crappy quality because of the setup of the QuickTime plugin. So I'll just show you. If I click advanced, I can go into the codec options. And in here, you need to remove this limit data rate to 90 kilobytes. That should go away. And you can set it to multi-pass. That's usually a good idea. And then go OK. And then I click render. And it will say frame 1 to 1. That's not right. Usually it figures it out. I can set it to global. That will work in this case. So it'll know it go from 0 to 299. Or I could just type it in, whatever I want. In this case, I just set it to global, and it'll be right. And I click OK. And it will start to render the animation. And you can see it has like a nice little flash going on there whenever it's evaluating nodes. There we go. And I'll just pop over to the desktop and find that file. That is here. And it's called Septa or something. Where did it go? It's up here. And there you go. So that is what I would like you to start out doing this morning.